Is it an invasive species or a beneficial native? Is it a problem with the plant or a problem with your nutrients? Today we are doing a deep dive on Southern Naiad. We aren't just talking about how to kill it, we're talking about why it's there. I'm going to show you how to distinguish it from Chara, Brittle Naiad, using just your nose and a magnifying glass. Then we'll cover why mechanical removal often fails, and I'll give you my personal recipe for a chemical cocktail that gets results every time. Welcome to episode 4 of Pondweed Problems. Southern Naiad, or Najas guadalupensis, also known as bushy pondweed, is a native submerged aquatic plant found throughout North and South America. This is an important distinction from our last episode. Unlike an invasive species, Southern Naiad is a natural and beneficial part of a healthy fishery and a healthy ecosystem in moderation. It is an excellent plant for providing habitat for invertebrates and cover for small fish. Its foliage and seeds are also a primary food source for a lot of waterfowl, making it a very valuable for wildlife as well. It becomes a weed when it grows so rapidly and densely that it chokes out other plants, interferes with fishing, swimming, and poses a risk to your pond's oxygen levels. Proper identification is critical, as Southern Naiad is often confused with its invasive cousin Brittle Naiad, as well as other common submerged plants. Southern Naiad is a rooted, submerged plant with long, thin, branching stems. The leaves are, very thin, narrow, and strap-like, about a half to an inch long. They are arranged oppositely on the stem or in whorls of 3. The leaves are deep green to purplish green. The key identifier or characteristic requires a magnifying glass. The leaf margins have very tiny microscopic teeth. Brittle Naiad, or Najas minor, is an invasive species from Europe. It looks very similar, but its key identifier is that its leaves are stiff, often curled or recurved, and have spines along the margins that are visible to the naked eye. Coontail, Ceratophyllum demersum. As we covered in episode 3, coontail is also a submerged native. The key characteristic is the coontail leaves are forked or branched, not simple and strap-like. Coontail have no roots, and it feels rough to the touch. Check out episode 3 to learn more about coontail. Click on the tab up in the upper right corner to watch the coontail episode if you're interested. Chara, aka muskgrass, is a macroalgae. While it may look like a plant, Chara is easily identified by its musky or garlic odor when crushed. It also has a rough, gritty, crusty feel to it. Like all the weeds we've discussed, Southern Naiad is a symptom of a deeper issue. Overabundant growth is usually a sign of excessive nutrients, shallow depths, and clear water. The nutrients come from common sources such as runoff, fertilized lawns, crop fields, golf courses, whatever. A pond with high nutrients is a prime buffet for Southern Naiad, which thrives in these enriched conditions and can quickly form dense choking mats. They also seem to be more prevalent in ponds with high visibility and in ponds with low average depths. A severe infestation of Southern Naiad creates 2 major problems. First, it creates a clogging problem. The dense topped out mats interfere with recreation, making it very difficult to fish through. Second, it creates a crashing problem. While the plants produce oxygen during the day, they consume oxygen during the night. And most importantly, when this massive volume of plant matter dies off in the fall or in the winter, its decomposition is carried out by bacteria that consume all of that dissolved oxygen. This can lead to an oxygen crash, stressing, or even killing your fish. This is why chemical intervention is, sometimes warranted to manage this biomass and reduce the chances of a fish kill. A final management challenge is its reproduction. Southern Naiad dies back each year, but sprouts from a heavy seed bank. It also spreads aggressively during the growing season through fragmentation, meaning every time you cut it with a boat prop or rake, the tiny pieces float away, and even they can propagate new plants. When you decide to treat a submerged plant like Southern Naiad, your chemical strategy is pretty much identical to the one we use for coontail. You must treat the water column to deliver the herbicide to the plant. This is done with either fast-acting contact herbicides or slower acting systemic herbicides. Contact herbicides are the sprinters. They kill only the plant tissue that they physically come in contact with, and they work relatively quickly. Diquat is a broad spectrum fast acting herbicide that is rated as excellent for Southern Naiad control. It provides rapid results, often within days. As we've stressed in every single episode, Diquat's main limitation is turbidity. The active ingredient binds almost instantly to suspended clay particles. If you apply Diquat to a muddy or turbid or murky pond, the chemical will pretty much be inactivated by the sediment before it even has a chance to have an effect on the plant. As I mentioned earlier, I usually see Southern Naiad in relatively clear water, but that's not always the case. Just be careful about disturbing the bottom sediment when you're out applying it. If you're in a boat, don't stir up all the bottom muck. Indothal is another highly effective contact herbicide, also rated as excellent for Southern Naiad control. It's very fast and very effective. Available in liquid and granular forms. You must pay close attention to the actual formulation. The amine salt can be toxic to fish, whereas the dipotassium salt, however, is much safer for fish at the recommended rates, which for this reason is what we'll talk about from here on out. Other than that, Indothal doesn't really have any limitations other than kind of the price is slightly more than the other contact herbicides. Flumioxazin is a fast-acting contact herbicide, also rated excellent for Southern Naiad. It's a broad-spectrum herbicide that works on many types of weeds species. It's also pH sensitive, and it degrades rapidly in water with a high pH or anything higher than 7.5. It must be applied in the morning when the pH is at its lowest. The reason pH is low in the morning is due to the fact that CO2 has built up overnight, and it reacts with the water, forming carbonic acid, which is acidic. Copper ethylenediamine complex, or comine, is a copper complex that is very good for Southern Naiad control. It's a broad spectrum herbicide that works on many types of weeds and even some algae. It can be toxic to copper sensitive fish, obviously, such as trout and koi, especially in ponds with low alkalinity. So make sure your alkalinity is above 50 parts per million before you go applying any type of copper product. Now, if you are ready to make that move on to these aquatic herbicides, I have provided an Amazon link in the description for you to check out. If you use one of these links that I provided, I do get a commission, and I would greatly appreciate that if you did. It doesn't cost you any more or less. Thank you in advance. Systemic herbicides are the marathon runners. They are absorbed by the plant and translocated through its vascular system, killing the entire organism. They are typically slower, but the control is usually more complete and lasts a lot longer. Fluridone is the gold standard systemic herbicide, rated excellent for Southern Naiad control. It works by inhibiting the pigment production, causing the plants to turn white and pinkish and slowly die over a 30 to 90 day period. This extremely slow kill is its biggest advantage. It allows the dead plant matter to decompose gradually, which prevents an oxygen crash that fast-acting herbicides can cause. Control can last for a full season or even longer. The long contact time it requires is also its main limitation. If your pond has significant water exchange, fluridone just won't work. the chemical will be diluted and flushed out before it can even be fully absorbed. It's only effective for whole pond treatments, not spot treatments. The safe and successful application of any chemical hinges entirely on a thorough pre-treatment assessment. This preparatory phase is simply not an optional step. It is the most critical part of the entire process. The vast majority of herbicide-related incidents, such as fish kills, are not caused by the chemicals themselves, but user error. This error stems from a failure to perform two fundamental measurements. One, calculating the precise volume of your pond and testing its water conditions. Step one is accurately determining pond volume. For submerged weeds like Southern Naiad, you aren't treating, the surface area. You are treating the entire, volume of water to achieve a specific herbicide concentration. The standard unit for measuring the volume of ponds is the acre foot. As a reminder, 1 acre foot is the volume of water required to cover 1 surface acre to a depth of 1 foot. The formula is surface acres times average depth equals acre feet. Now, step 2, water chemistry testing. Before you choose your herbicide, you must test your water to see which chemicals have the right of way to work. Before you use Aquatic, you must check your water clarity. If your pond has muddy or murky water, Aquatic is just not a good choice. The suspended sediment will, instantly bind to the herbicide and deactivate it on contact, wasting your time and money. As we covered, flumioxazin is extremely sensitive to high pH. If your pH is above 7.5, you'll get poor control as the chemical will degrade too rapidly. For any copper-based product, you'll need to test your pond's alkalinity. If the alkalinity is less than 50 parts per million, this will be a risky option, especially if you have koi or trout. Use with caution and at lower rates if your pond has a low alkalinity. For fluoridone, this is a physical test. Does your pond have constant inflow and constant outflow? If so, you will not be able to maintain that 30 to 90 day contact time required for fluoridone. Using it in a pond with high exchange is literally pouring money down the drain. And it ain't cheap, let me tell you. Alright, you've done your pre-treatment assessment and now you're ready to apply. The key for Southern Naiad is that the herbicide must be delivered and dispersed into the water column. If you're treating Naiad in deeper water, you must use a method to, get that chemical down deep into the water. If it's shallow, the herbicide will usually, disperse down into the kill zone by itself. But if it's in water deeper than, say, 3 feet, use, these methods. Subsurface injection is the preferred method for liquid herbicides like diquat, liquid indithol, liquid fluoridone, those types. The chemical is diluted in a tank and then, pumped through a weighted hose or a wand that is placed under the water's surface to release the chemical down there into the weed beds. Granular application are used for herbicides that come in, obviously a granular or pelleted form. The granules are broadcasted over the top of the water using a hand spreader, and they sink to the bottom, releasing the herbicide, directly into the lower stems of the plants. The granules dissolve and, release that active ingredient right into the kill zone. A note on surfactants. In our duckweed episode, we stressed that a, non-ionic surfactant was required in order to, stick to and penetrate the waxy cuticle. So for Southern Naiad, surfactants they're not technically required. You want the herbicide, to mix and disperse evenly throughout the water column. Acidifying agents are sometimes recommended with pH-sensitive herbicides, such as flumioxazin. Your dosage will usually be based on the acre-feet calculation. The label will provide a rate in gallons per acre foot or something like that, pounds per acre foot. Some herbicide labels have rates per surface acre at certain average depths. In the previous episode, I went through, worked examples, but instead of doing that, let's just go through my, recommended rates of my top choices for Southern Naiad control. If you want to go through a worked example, check out episode 3 where I go over how to control coontail. It's pretty similar to this. Comine is my go-to herbicide when treating big stands of Southern Naiad. I rarely have koi or trout in any ponds that I manage, so it's not really something that I normally worry about. For a 1 acre treatment, add 5 to 10 gallons of comine to a 50-gallon spray tank, or when using a 4-gallon backpack sprayer, I increase the concentration of the tank solution just a little bit so I can cover more area with it. For the backpack treatment, I'll usually add about 2.5 gallons of comine. Depending on the density of naiad, just remember to only treat a quarter to a third of the pond at once to avoid an oxygen crash. Diquat is another solid choice for naiad. I normally use a standard rate of 2 gallons per acre and mix it in a 50-gallon tank, or 24 ounces in a 4-gallon backpack sprayer. Diquat is better in clearer water, so don't use this if your pond is really murky. Comine Diquat is a great combo cocktail for Southern Naiad. In a 50-gallon tank, add 5 gallons of comine and 2 gallons of Diquat for a 1 acre treatment. In a 4-gallon backpack sprayer, I'll add a gallon of comine and 24 ounces of Diquat. This combo has been a very useful tool for me and almost always gets the desired results. Dead naiad. Fluoridone works very well to control Southern Naiad. Fluoridone is a full lake treatment, and you need to know your pond's volume and average depth. The fluoridone needs about 30 days of contact time, so only use this if your pond doesn't have constant flow through or if you're expecting a heavy rain event in the near future. Use the table provided on the label to get the fluoridone concentration up to at least 45 parts per billion. When you kill a massive pond-wide mat of submerged weeds with a fast-acting herbicide, all of that vegetation begins to decay all at once. This decomposition is an aerobic process, meaning it is carried out by bacteria that consume massive amounts of dissolved oxygen. This sudden oxygen crash can actually be lethal, sometimes resulting in a fish kill. So never treat your entire pond all at once with a fast-acting contact herbicide. Treat only a quarter to a third of the pond at a time. Wait 10 to 14 days until that has a chance to decompose before you try and go treating the next section of your pond. The only exception to this is fluoridone. Its slow 30 to 90 day kill is designed to prevent this, massive bad oxygen crash. It allows the plants to decompose, gradually. Finally, you must read the label for water use restrictions. These vary pretty widely by each product. Most modern herbicides like Diquat and fluoridone have no restrictions on swimming or fishing right after the application. For livestock watering, restrictions vary. Diquat often has 1 day, maybe. Indothal can have a 7 to 25 day restriction depending on the concentration used. Using treated water on your lawn or crops can cause severe damage. Fluoridone has a very long restriction, often 7 to 30 days. Flumi may have a 5-day restriction. Diquat often has 1 to 5 day irrigation restriction. Indothal, I don't think has a restriction on irrigation, but for real, don't take my word for it. Read the label. There are a lot of different brands with different, concentrations of the active ingredients, so read the label. As we've stressed in every episode, chemical treatments are reactive. They are a temporary or band-aid fix of an underlying symptom. The key to long-term success is to change the conditions of your pond to make it less suitable, less hospitable for excessive weed growth in the first place. Nutrient mitigation is the single most important long-term strategy. You must address the root cause, excessive nutrients. This means reducing fertilizer applications near the pond, maintaining septic systems and creating vegetative buffers of unmowed grass around the pond's edge to filter runoff, as water runs into the pond. In our duckweed episode, we said dyes were, ineffective, but for submerged weeds like Southern Naiad, dyes are actually a pretty good option. They work by coloring the water blue or black or whatever color you want, shading the water column and blocking the sunlight that submerged plants need for photosynthesis. They are, most effective when applied early in the spring or before the growing season gets underway, and must be, reapplied every once in a while to maintain their concentration. For small infestations, you can physically remove naiad, with a lake rake or a cutter. Now, just like with algae and coontail, this is, incredibly labor intensive, but Southern Naiad has a, critical flaw that you must be aware of. It reproduces from fragments. If you just cut it, the leaves, they'll float off, not controlling plant. You are actively spreading it and planting a new crop. If you use this method, you must make a serious effort to remove all of the cut fragments from the water. Grass carp are the, natural solution. They'll eat Southern Naiad, maybe. It depends what other aquatic plants are available for them to eat. If there's a lot of beneficial plants like American pondweed, the grass carp will usually ignore the naiad. They're pretty picky eaters, but according to some sources, Southern Naiad is a preferred food source for triploid grass carp, but from my experience, they'll select other weeds before even touching the Southern Naiad. Let me know in the comments if you've had similar or different results. Stocking rates, vary depending on who you talk to. I usually recommend 6 per littoral acre. A littoral acre is a shallow area around the lake or the pond, typically 6 feet and less. As always, you must use sterile grass carp and obtain the proper permits. Southern Naiad is a native plant, so remember that the goal should never be eradication, but control. By addressing the root causes of nutrient pollution and using smart preventative measures, you can keep this plant in balance. I am planning a nutrient binding episode coming up soon, so keep tuned in and subscribe to my channel if you want to learn about tackling the root cause of your weed problems. That's all I have for you in this episode of the Pondweed Problems. If you gained something from this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you would hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Doing that helps grow this channel so I can keep making these videos for you guys. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments and let me know if there's something that you're interested in that you'd like me to cover in another episode. If you're just itching to learn about controlling other aquatic pests, click on the Pondweed Problems playlist. If you have a good handle on your weed problems and are, dead set on growing a healthy fishery, check out the Species Spotlight playlist where I go over how to manage certain fish species in your pond. Now remember, you don't need a PhD or a master's degree to master the science of pondology. It's your pond, so don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do with it. You can create your dream pond. You can be your own biologist.